Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
Well, welcome. Today we have a speaker, Mark Coleman. He's practiced insight meditation for 15 years, and in the early 90s he was on numerous intensive retreats for 3 to 6 months each in England, America, and Asia. He studied with Advaita teachers in India and recently with Dzogchen teachers here in Asia. He's a therapist in training, and he teaches mindfulness-based stress reduction, which is something I'm sure we could all use. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mark.
Thank you. So welcome everybody. Nice to see so many faces. Pleasure to be here. Today I want to talk on themes around attachment and letting go. And I thought about this talk yesterday. I'm a keen soccer fan. And I don't know how many sports fans there are here. And as an Englishman, I'm deprived of my soccer on TV. There's very little soccer that I'm used to. And there was the big game was yesterday in England, and to catch it live, I had to get up at 6 a.m. to go to a bar in San Rafael to catch it on satellite, which was a major ordeal. And so we were watching the game, and it was a packed bar. And then halfway through, we paid $20 to get in. Halfway through the game, the transmission goes off. It's like the big game, my team's, possibly going to win. And then that was it for the rest of the game. We lost the transmission, and so I have to go home and ring England to find out the score. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking, well, this is a great example of what I'm trying to talk about. Is here we have an interest, a desire that I'm interested in, and then, of course, I don't have control over the outcome. And so what's my relationship to that? What's my relationship to those things that I desire, yet they're outside of my control? And if I was really attached to demanding that I see that game, the mind gets tight, it gets contracted, and I would have suffered a lot. As that happened, it was just like, it was okay. Okay, the game was on, the game was off, and I went home. I'd like to read a quote from one of my teachers in India, Punjaji. He said, "The thief of peace is the desire for the transient, so aspire only for the permanent. Here, this eternal moment. There are no desires. Just keep quiet and see what you really need. Before the wave rises, there is the ocean. Before desire moves, it is emptiness. The entire universe is your own desire, so enjoy it. But don't be destroyed by it. Because anything you desire and attach to, you become a slave to." And I found that particularly poignant, this idea of, another one of my teachers called it, we're often beggars at the gates of the senses. That we kind of sometimes get enslaved to our own desires, and that very enslavement creates a lot of pain for us, even though the objects that we're after might be very pleasurable. So as I'm talking through this talk, often there's a confusion between in Buddhism, one of the central themes is how to relate to and work with desire. And that can create confusion because there's a whole range of desires, from very healthy, natural desires of the body's needs to eat and sleep and rest and be social. And there's desires that what the Buddha was really pointing to is the attachment to the desire and how that attachment creates suffering, creates pain for us. There's should I have it? No, I'll leave that. So one of the analogies that the Buddha used for suffering was going along an old horse and cart, not that we have those anymore, but imagine if you were sitting in a horse and cart and the wheel was just a little bit off. So every time it went round, it was a little bit just gnawing. It was kind of almost okay, but just a little. And I often find that with our experience that we can often feel pretty okay in our lives, and yet there's often this sort of niggling, well, if only I just had, or if only I was just with this person, or if only I had that experience just a little bit, just a little, if I was just a little happier, or my car was a little nicer, or my job, my boss was a little kinder. There's often that niggling background restlessness. And so our response to that, not just to that, but often a sense of a gnawing kind of emptiness that we can feel within, is it can propel the desire to fill the holes and the sense of lack that we feel. And often, and our culture really exploits that sense of that we can really obtain happiness through particularly material objects, but not just material objects. I have this wonderful advert which I love looking through the magazines for little Dharma quotes. And there's a guy here sitting on the top of a mountain with his new pickup and every imaginable, he's got his TV and his video and his canoe and his kayak and his aqualung outfit and his guitar, and he's kind of got it all. And it says, Spence has put a new twist on an old philosophy. To be one with everything, he says, you've got to have one of everything. That's why I mean, this is what we're sold. That's why he also has the new Ford Ranger. So he can seek wisdom on a mountaintop, take off in hot pursuit of enlightenment, and connect with Mother Earth. So, I mean, this is kind of funny, and it's interesting how they're using Buddhist and Dharma values to sell things. There was an ocean cruise advertised, 2 weeks to the Caribbean, and by the time you'll reach there, you'll be in Nirvana. So, when I don't really tune that much into mainstream media, but when I do, I'm aware of the bombardment that we live in that culture where we're really sold that message and that dream. And one of my responses to that is one of compassion, that instead of giving ourselves a hard time, that we're kind of sort of continually seeking for happiness outside of ourselves, more it's an understanding it's no wonder why we do that, because our culture is so much giving us that message. So as I said, in the Buddhist teachings, the Four Noble Truths particularly, which is the core of the teachings, is really around suffering, desire, and the letting go of desire, which leads us to freedom. And what I notice with that force of desire in myself is that when I'm caught up, hooked into something, whatever the experience or thing that I'm desiring is, not only is that state painful in the sense that it's contracted, no matter how wonderful the object we're looking at or seeking after, there's always a sense of lack, there's a sense of tightening and clenching in the body, there's a sense of feeling unfulfilled, a sense of I won't be complete until I have this experience, object, person. But also, the way desire arises is that when it arises, it obscures the natural peace and happiness that we can actually feel right now. That in some senses we are, in our true nature, complete and whole right now. And it's this gnawing movement to external things which continually creates that sense of insufficiency. Rumi said this, he said, "How long will we fill our pockets like children with dirt and stones? Let the world go. holding on to it, we never know ourselves, and we can never fly. So another thing that arises when we get fixated in desire is we get kind of very tunnel visioned. It's like nothing else sometimes can matter or exist except the ice cream, or the job, or whatever it is, whatever our particular flavor of desire is. I remember I was on a retreat many, many years ago in England, and a friend of mine had a cold, and it was a long, long hike to the pharmacy. So I went out in the pouring rain, but I was also on retreat, and I was wanting chocolate. So I took this long, long hike, and the chocolate kind of became this big fixation in my mind. I got to the shop, to the pharmacy. Actually, it was a shop, and there was lots of chocolate. This is in England, they're big on chocolate. So I filled my pockets with chocolate, forgot all about the Lemsip, and came all the way back home. And there was my friend lying sick, and I got so tunnel visioned into the chocolate, I forgot. Fortunately, that was a long time ago.
Did you go back and get it?
I didn't. It's a long time ago. Another way we get hooked in desire is the idea that we somehow have this belief system, which is kind of interesting because it's quite delusory, that if we hold on to something, we can hold on to it, as if we have the power to hold on to an experience and make it stay around. So if we're sitting in meditation and we're experiencing a little calm, bliss, peace, and it's like, ooh, this is nice. Ooh, I'll just keep this around and keep jiggling with the conditions so it kind of stays around. And usually as soon as that mind state comes up, ooh, I want more of this, usually it dissipates, it goes. And it's the same in life, whether it's a relationship, a state of mind. We don't have the power to make things stick around. The nature of things is that they're continually coming and going. And when we grab on, it's like grabbing onto a sunset. We can't grab onto a sunset, however beautiful it is. It also stops us from being able to be very present. Either we are in relationship to our experience, if there's some desire either wanting or pushing away, it usually precludes an ability to be with what is. Usually if we want something, and particularly a person, in my experience, if I'm wanting somebody, I usually stop seeing the person for who they are and just see them through the filter of my own needs. And similarly with things that we don't like, it's just things that kind of, if we have a pain in the knee, the first response is usually, ugh, I didn't come to meditate to feel the pain in my body. I wanted to come and feel calm and quiet, or whatever it is. There's that kind of habitual pushing away, which is like a filter between our experience. So I want to spend the rest of the time just talking about what I regard as my main practice, which is this continual practice of letting go in any and every moment to whatever situation arises. I feel like, for me, it's the key to living a free life, to living a life that's free of suffering. Letting go sometimes gets a lot of airplay in the Buddhist world, and that's fine. Sometimes we can be too quick to let go. Sometimes in meditation, we've heard about this, about letting go, and sometimes it can be, we can misuse it in a way of when we're experiencing unpleasant experience, and the mind can too quickly go to, I'll let go of that and come back to the breath. Or I'll let go of that unpleasant memory. And so that was just as a warning that the letting go isn't a pushing away or a detaching. It's not an aversive movement. And for me, the first step with letting go has been to learn how to let be before I can let go, because I need to know what I'm letting go of. I need to be able to be with it, to see it clearly before I can let go of it. So the letting be for me, it's an opening to the experience. It's a sense of allowing. It's a quality of acceptance, if that's possible. And often for me, it's a softening. It's like a relaxing around experience. And I think in meditation, it's a great place to see this. We sit down and we have certain ideas about how the practice should be, and then the world decides to happen. Whatever it is, noise, breathing, cars, body pain, rampant thoughts, the whole caboodle. And I found what's most useful to be with that experience is a quality of softening. It's like this is what's happening. This is next. This is. It's like letting go of my agenda of how things should be, and that to me has a soft quality. They say that in the Buddhist cosmology, there's all kinds of different realms. There's 37 or however many realms there are, certainly in the Theravadan system. And the human realm is actually about the fourth from bottom. We're actually at the quite low end of the pile in terms of the different realms that the living beings are supposed to live in. But the human realm is supposed to be so precious in terms of being able to wake up, because it has this perfect mixture of pain and pleasure. And so we don't get too caught in pain, and we don't get too lost in pleasure, although we can easily go to either extreme. So because of that, it provides a perfect opportunity for practicing letting go, because it really is this mixture of pleasant and unpleasant. So I just want to go through a whole bunch of things that I thought about in terms of where I practice, and I doubt I'll get through at all what I've written, but so in terms of areas that we can look at to let go, one of the places that I notice I get caught quite easily is in my house. I share a house. I live with a landlady, and it's her house. But I've often found whoever I'm living with, it's always a source of contention, or people have their own issues around space and just different value systems about how they want to live. And so it's an area that the self can arise pretty strongly around whether that person does the dishes or they don't do the dishes, or they play the music loud or they don't. Or I had my birthday a couple of days ago, and I had all my cards around and had a party, and then the next day my landlady moved all the cards out of the house. And I was like, wait a minute, that's not supposed to happen. And so I just saw that whole reaction, that kind of, how dare you? And that, and they said, well, what do I do with that? This is an ongoing situation, that we always have different ideas about the house. So where does the practice come with that situation? So, I saw the contraction, she wasn't around, I saw the reaction, I saw my mind spinning a story, and then it just is a slow process of softening. Okay, this is, and it's not to say that letting go is necessarily passive. It would be quite appropriate for me to say, look, that was really, I felt quite hurt or offended that you did that, but it wouldn't be coming from a place of reactivity. If I was able to open to the experience of the hurt or pain or injustice that I felt. Another great place that I think we all have to practice letting go is driving, correct? For the people who drive, or uni, I'm sure it's even worse. It's I drive on the 101 every day, and it's inevitable traffic jam wherever it is. The Bay Bridge usually for me, the Golden Gate Bridge. And what's our response to it? What's our response to it when we hit traffic? Is it, damn? Is it rage? Is it whole, why didn't I leave earlier? Kind of self-chastising. And what does our mind do when we meet something that we don't like? Does it spin out a whole long story of hatred and hating the other drivers? Or can we kind of flow with that situation? Okay, traffic. Yeah, that's what happens. That's the Bay Area. And just bring awareness to that whole process of reaction. Another place that certainly living in the city is around noise. I think it's a huge issue for a lot of people around our relationship to noise, whether it's traffic noise, neighbors, music. I live next to very loud dogs. A wolf dog actually and howls every time there's a siren anywhere within 50 miles. And any time of the night, day or night. And I noticed my mind getting very tight. And Ajahn Chah said something very beautiful. He said, it's not the noise that disturbs us, but we disturb the noise. The dog is just howling, and the sirens are just sirening, and the traffic's just trafficking. And it's just noise, it's just sound, it's just hearing. And yet we bring, or can bring, this whole wave of reactivity, aggression, anger, frustration, negativity. And I see how my mind I can sometimes, I'm just lying in bed, and the dog is just howling. It's just howling, just dog's doing its thing. And other times the mind is, I just want to, whatever. And actually one time I called the police. I said, this is crazy. And little did I know that in Mill Valley the police have nothing to do, and they were there in 2 minutes at my door. I didn't quite want that strong a response. So again, it's not to say that we're passive, that we just be a victim of circumstance. We can be very proactive. But again, it's with mindfulness around watching the negativity, seeing, I think one of the things I've really learned from practice is that whatever habits we have create future habit. Whether it's a habit of desire or a habit of reactivity, the more we allow that to happen and indulge in that, the more we fuel that. So the more I can practice the letting go, to say the dog barking, actually the easier it becomes, not always, but it becomes Thich Nhat Hanh calls it a mindfulness bell. It's a mindfulness bell encouraging me to soften, to open, to be with that situation. Relatively in the scheme of things, a dog barking, isn't too bad, compared to the suffering in the world. Another place I notice that a lot is when I go to India. I go to India most years, and there is no way of controlling the environment. I don't know how many people here have been to India, but it's intense on every level, on every sense door level. It's intense, and it's actually a wonderful practice. I sit in Bodh Gaya, which is where the Buddha got enlightened most years. It's cold, it's damp, there stinks. The restaurants all around the monastery play loud music 18 hours a day. It's intense. And the first week there, I usually hate it. I think, what am I doing here? I could be sitting at Spirit Rock or Green Gulch or somewhere where it's comfortable and quiet and luxurious. And then my mind actually learns to grow to the experience. It actually has to surrender, otherwise you go mad. And there's somehow having to surrender, it's like suddenly the mind grows. It's like in the West we become so used to thinking we can actually control our environment. We don't learn how to practice letting go. We think we can, block out the noise and the unpleasant experience and actually we really lose something out in that. And I find my mind gets into a wonderful empty place in Asia because I can sleep through anything. I can, just sense experience becomes, it's just part of the show. And it's a wonderful thing that happens to the mind. And I always encourage everybody to go to India as a wonderful training ground for the mind. Relationships, another huge area around desire and letting go. It seems like that the essence of relationship is created to challenge how much we can let go, how much we can compromise and negotiate, and see our desire, see how much we can negotiate and be at ease with letting go. I have a partner, she lives in England. We have this bizarre long-distance relationship. And sometimes we let go and one of us moves to the other country. And then sometimes the other lets go and they come to this country. And And it's just it just feels like a whole, often it's the place that we get most caught. We get most caught in our, how we desire things to be. And it's either hell realm, if we're tight, and if we can be a little more spacious, it's a little easier, And everybody's nodding, so. And also, learning to keep the heart open, even if things aren't going our way and people are seemingly being hurtful or selfish or self-centered. Can we keep an open heart to that person, without rejecting them? Can we learn to soften? Another big area is body image, our relationship to our bodies, whether it's wanting a great physique or wanting the body to stay younger, or just not being happy with the body we got. It can create a lot of suffering around, we look in the mirror, it's not what we want to see. And again, we're sold such a strong image of how the body should be. And what's our relationship to that? I always notice that when I get a very bad haircut. And I notice how attached I am to the body image. You get a bad haircut, you really feel it for a few days. The self is like, oh dear, that's not me. I don't want to look like that.
You feel grateful for having such nice hair?
Pardon?
You ever feel grateful for having?
Yeah, well... yeah, my dad's pretty bald. I feel very happy that this hasn't happened yet. Another place that I see a lot is the way we incessantly think in this culture. Whether it's just we're kind of just going along our day, we're commenting or running a constant story about what's happening in our lives, or a constant "I'm not good enough. This isn't good enough. It's not perfect enough. You should have done this. You should have done that. Why did you do that?" I think a lot of us have very busy minds. And again, the culture kind of, supports that. And for me, it's been I take this on as a real practice of just interrupting that flow. And I'm just driving along, and my mind's just and it's just like, no, I don't need to do that. I don't need to have that quality of life where my mind is just whirring around old stories, old themes. It really interrupts being able to be present, and particularly with the judging, labeling, condemning, self-critical thoughts. I think it's really helpful if people can learn to see that, to open to that, and find ways to say enough, to say no, I'm not going to buy into that thought stream, that belief that that's who I am. The thing I find most helpful with that incessant chatter, particularly the self-denigrating chatter, is to find some way to actually find it amusing. I used to when I was on retreat, I used to imagine this judging voice with this big English judge's wig going, "Bad, and exaggerating the thoughts. You're a bad meditator. You missed your breath 3 times." That was so. And just finding a way to be light with it, because if I find lightness with that self-condemning, the thing that most takes the rug out from it, because it takes out the belief in it, because it's just a voice, it's just some old tapes we have playing. Another place we get very caught, or can get caught, is around. The whole issue of identity is huge, and I won't really go into that. But one aspect of it is our spiritual identity. How much do we get caught up in the belief of having, I'm a meditator, or I'm a Buddhist, or I'm a good Buddhist, or I'm a Zen, or a Vipassana, or Tibetan? How much do we get caught up in that identity of being somebody spiritual who does certain things and doesn't do other things, or feels certain things? I remember I was doing a 3-month retreat a few years ago at IMS, and I had a really painful time in the middle, and I couldn't practice for a while. and I was just doing my own thing. And I really saw my spiritual ego big time, because I couldn't be the good meditator. I couldn't, sit still, and I couldn't walk, and I was out in the woods playing music. I was doing a very different retreat, and I saw how much I'd built up this idea of being a good yogi, a good meditator, and so it's just another place to see where we get caught, because any identification becomes a limitation. It becomes something we have to kind of box ourselves into, that we can sort of do certain things and can't do other things. And it's just another trap. Whatever identity we create for ourselves, if that's who we take ourselves to be, it's limiting. It's not. No identity can ever address and allow for the fullness of who we are. So I'm running out of time here. I want to have some time for questions. So just the last thing I'll say is, as an encouragement to look at whenever you notice you're suffering, whenever you feel in pain, to examine, as the Buddha laid out zillions of times in the teachings, the cause of suffering is some form of desire, some form of attachment to a desire. So it's wanting things to be a certain way, not wanting things, wanting certain things, not wanting other things. And for me, it's been helpful to really examine that. Well, when I'm suffering, where am I caught? Where am I caught in desire? Where am I caught in attachment? It's not that desire is wrong. We all have desires, but when we get attached to them, when we want things to be a certain way, and are pushing away a lot of experience, that leads to suffering. And just it's a very simple reminder to, a little investigation. So I should stop, because I do want to have time for some questions. If anybody has any desire or suffering.
There's a physical concomitant to meditation for me, in the sense that I might go on a trip, a perseverating trip, you this way, you that way, whatever, and then begin to breathe into it and experience letting go, or just changing the subject, or having a week, like you talked about, having a residue in my body of this experience, which stays with me for a while. And I'm much more, I wouldn't say more trouble, but I'm with that a great deal of the time when I meditate. And I was just wondering about your experience, because I was imagining when you were talking about the bar and the soccer game. Having lived in England, I know that's the soccer. Beat each other. But I was imagining myself in that situation. I would have been furious. I would have been, felt that anger at the machine, the world controlling us that I can feel. Maybe it was consider that. I would have stayed right in here for quite a while. I wouldn't have gotten over it. You just said you just let it go. I said, I wish I could do that.
Yeah, well, it's not always that easy.
Yeah, I know. But can you talk about that? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. No, I think
it's the body, and it's the body, not just the
no, it's very multi-layered, and I think it could be a lot of different things, and certainly there's the mental level of self-judgment, and which we're all quite familiar with on some level, and sometimes that's very non-verbal, or it's either non-verbal, it's just a very visceral, emotional, deep sense of, say, unworthiness or not feeling good enough. Sometimes it can be triggered by a thought, but sometimes it just seems to come through the body, and it is more sticky. It is harder to just, with the mind, it's you can play with it more easily. With the body, well, different things. One is it's just another experience to be with, on one level, opening, being with, softening, looking for the idea that it shouldn't be happening, looking for the idea that it says something about you that's bad or wrong, looking for some kind of spiritual identification of this shouldn't be happening now in my practice, or I should be able to get over this, or somehow I should have left this one a long time ago. It could be seeing investigating what emotional states might be fueling that, or whether there's any subtle mental traces.
You don't think it's anything with the body to help about it. It's still trying to work with the thinking about it, or evaluating it, or learning what to think about it.
Well, I think initially,
Stretching or
yeah, it depends how deep and pervasive it is. I mean, initially, the encouragement is to open to it, to be with it, soften, breathe into it, allow it. We're not really trying to get rid of it. We're really just opening to the experience. Similar with thoughts, we're not trying to get rid of them. We're just being awake to them. If it's really long and pervasive, yeah, sometimes going outside, taking a walk, changing the energy. If it's something that's really sagging your spirit down, it's really going on for a long time, sure, get up, it's really about how can we be with our experience with balance. If that experience is so heavy we can't even bring any awareness to it, then we need to bring in light, to bring in energy, to bring in some joy. The Buddha talks a lot about turning the mind to joy, turning the mind to that which is uplifting. If the mind is really, sagged down in that kind of, whatever it is, unworthy place. So for me it's nature. It would be going out into nature, whether it's the garden or whatever, to bring some upliftment in the mind. And investigating, just allowing a sense of investigation, but not a mental thing. Just, well, what is this? What is this? What is this trying to tell me? What is this about? What's the trigger? What's the cause? What makes it go away?
How has your sitting with Punjaji informed your teaching of the Buddha Dhamma?
Right, that's a big question. I've never been asked that one. Have you sat with Punjaji?
No, with Gangaji.
Oh, okay. Well, he basically helped me to understand the truth of who I am, the truth of emptiness, and to let go of the habitual identification with the sense of self. He opened that door for the first time for me. So the less I'm caught in the belief in this self as who I am, then the more it filters through my teaching. It's helped in many ways. It's sort of, but it's I wouldn't say, I can't say anything directly. You have to contact with a great teacher, and it sort of filters through the being, and it comes through. But I can't say, well, it's not directly causal. That led to that. But to the extent that I felt much freer and clear about who I was, then that's naturally going to help my practice and my life and teaching and whatever else I do. Yeah, thanks. It's a short answer. I'm aware there's a few questions, so.
Yeah, we had one of our teachers, Jim Wilson, comes there the first Sunday, and a while ago he gave a talk on the different approaches to Buddhism, and he talked about the difference between purification type of approach and then the other approach. One of the other approaches is to avoid clinging and avoid attachment, which you've been talking about. And I think he associated the purification one with the Theravada. So I was just wondering what your experience of going to India so much about, is there a lot of emphasis on the purification, not even having the desires? Or are you happy with the clinging approach that you're just not going to, you're going to work on the clinging and attachment, but not worry about this more ascetic, not even have the desires occur?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, that's... yeah, I mean, the teachings say that as much as we can trust the translations and the oral lineage that it came through, the teachings do point to the ending of greed, desire, hatred, and delusion. My understanding in talking to various teachers in the West, certainly my teachers in the West, although there may be an understanding of that, there's more the sense of what's really important is the non-attachment to those as they arise. So it's not like it's not that desires may be extinguished, but the attachment is uprooted. So we can still enjoy the myriad things of life, but there's no attachment. There was a lovely story of the Dalai Lama. He was at a conference in this country somewhere. He was and the monastery he was at made cheese and fruitcake, and he's a big fan of fruitcake. And during the afternoon tea, they just gave him cheese because he's a monk, and they didn't think fruitcake was appropriate. So all through the rest of the conference, he was thinking, I really want some fruitcake. But he was also happy just to hang out with the cheese. So it's like, so the desire may be there, but the attachment, the clinging, the suffering around it is gone. So that would be the difference. I would say it's a fine point of distinction, which for most of us, the actual uprooting of all greed, hatred, and delusion is a little ways down the line. I'm not wanting to say that, I mean, it could happen very quickly for some people, but generally, it's a moment-to-moment working with whatever's arising. And in a way, it's really what's happening in this moment is important, rather than some future possible goal. You know, can I be free of clinging and attachment to whatever arises in this moment?
What you just said segues really well with my question. Whenever I hear a lecture on letting go, on non-attachment, my shackles really go up. You probably see me just resisting you like crazy.
You won't be the only one, I can tell you that.
Yeah. What the Dalai Lama let go of was that desire, but I'm not sure I understand the difference between that and a certain kind of resignation that I'm not resigned to. My roommate once said to me, you need enough greed to be prosperous, you need enough hate to guard your rights. So I said to her, how much delusion do you need?
The answer was,
of course you didn't answer it. So my question to you is, you're not going to give up, you're not going to let go of your... and I'm really annoyed because I smoke cigarettes, which is annoying to me, my self-image. But also, everybody drives cars. I haven't driven a car since I was 21. I'm 23 now. You're not going to give up your... maybe you'll give up your second Jeep or your third Volkswagen. You're not going to give up your first one. You're not going to give up your trip to India. And you're not going to give up your turtleneck or your good looks. So, what are you letting go of? And what do you say to someone who has nothing, who has no first Jeep, or a first house, or a landlady, or anything, and is living behind a curtain in a partitioned room with 4 families? What do you tell them to let go of? And what's the difference between letting go and taking the kind of resignation where resignation really, giving up a fruitcake is noble, but giving up a life is not. So where do you draw the line between letting go and saying, I'm human and I deserve this much. I want it.
Yeah. Well, it's not so much the object really is immaterial, and I've seen much happier people on the streets of India than I have in Tiburon, or in Mill Valley, or in, we're living in a, pleasure loca here, pleasure realm. We're living in an extremely affluent part of the world, and yet it clearly isn't doing it for a lot of people. I don't see people any more happy here than I do anywhere else in India, for instance. So it's not so much the object, but our relationship to it. Somebody could have a house in Tiburon that's $5 million and be quite free of desire to that whole experience. It'd be unlikely, but it's possible. For any of those who live in Tiburon, my apologies for thinking it out. So it's not so much that we I sort of started talking a little at the beginning between wholesome and unwholesome desire. Basically, a wholesome desire is that which leads to greater happiness, freedom, peace, compassion. So, we all have a desire to be free, to be happy, to be awake, to be kind. Generally, that's, they're healthy desires, and they lead to a greater happiness of being. There's a lot of desires that lead to more desire, that lead to our suffering and other people's suffering, whether it's on a global scale, which is quite obvious, or even on a personal interrelationship scale, sexuality, particularly. So it's not so much. We're not saying we kind of suppressing and condemning our human desires. We're just saying, look at the relationship, and in that relationship creates the suffering. Does that? So it's not the object itself, it's our relationship to the object.
You're answering that question for someone who has the object. I'm asking you the question as someone who does not have anything.
Well, I don't want to go into abstraction because I'd prefer to keep it to your experience.
That's his experience.
Yeah, I think you're begging the question. I think you're hedging.
So no, you said you have everything, and you were talking about someone who has nothing.
Well,
clarify for me.
My question is this. Let me put it a different way. There's a life of the Buddha that begins talking about the economic and religious and material climate that prepared the way for that kind of middle way. The population to preach the Dharma, to preach a middle way, you can't have an extreme. Someone in extreme poverty is going to be surviving. They're going to be spending their time surviving. And there are a lot of people, even in America, whom I know, who spend countless hours every week, every month, and every year, year after year, surviving. And it's very important to survive. I'm not sure what that level of living is, because we all end up having to survive, whether you have $1 zillion or nothing.
Right.
If you don't survive, you're not living. Right. On the other hand,
so even though someone who's poor has very little, the teaching is still the same in terms of, and poverty is extremely relative. As a person who lives in Marin, I'm extremely poor and in debt. It's relative. I'm not that poor compared to, 2/5 of the population probably. Yet it's still the relationship to wanting and having. There can be people who don't have much who are okay with that. I'm not saying it's not okay for people to want, particularly if you're poor. But it's the relationship. Is it the relationship one of holding on in tightness and resentment for those who have, or like a complete sense of dissatisfaction in oneself unless one has this level of material, physical wealth? We need to wrap up.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. Thank you.
Reminds me so much of going to Costa Rica, and which is not India by any means, but people still struggle, and it's much poorer than the United States. And coming back to San Francisco, and my reaction the first day was how unhappy people here are. And they have everything. They're unhappy. It's just so striking. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.